Indiana means land of the Indians. Today we use the terms Native Americans and Indigenous people instead of Indians. Native Americans lived on the land that became Indiana for over 10,000 years before settlers from other places moved here. The Miami, Potawatomi, Lenape, Shawnee, Wabash, Kaskaskia, Sauk, Fox, Piankashaw, and Eel River are some of the tribes that lived here when European settlers arrived. From around 1750 to 1815, the tribes pushed back against the settlers trying to take their land. Through many treaties, settlers took hundreds of thousands of acres of Native Americans' land and forced them to move farther west. In 1816, when Indiana became a state, Native Americans still lived in about 2/3 of the state. It is important to understand that Indiana history did not begin when immigrants from Europe reached the land. There were many people already here with their own foods, cultures, and religions. The U.S. government passed something called the Land Ordinance of 1785. This document set up an organized way to sell Western land to European immigrants moving into the area. At the time, Indiana was considered Western land. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 was the document that set up the Northwest Territory. The Northwest Territory included what would become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. When the U.S. Congress passed the Northwest Ordinance, they made it a law that people who lived in the territory could not enslave other people. Even though the territory was supposed to be free, some settlers continued to enslave African Americans. A man named William Henry Harrison was a delegate, a person chosen to represent the Northwest Territory in front of the national government in Washington, D.C. He presented a document called the Land Act of 1800. When Congress passed the act, it made it easier for settlers to buy land. Many German and Irish immigrants and immigrants from the East Coast moved to Indiana so they could buy land. In May 1800, a large chunk of land that they called the Indiana Territory was separated from the original Northwest Territory, and our journey to becoming a state started. William Henry Harrison was chosen by President John Adams to be the governor of the Indiana Territory. Since we were beginning to form a government, we needed a capital. At that time, the only post office in the territory was in Vincennes, Indiana. There was a busy trading post there, too. It was the best place to receive messages and send messages, and so Vincennes was chosen as the Indiana Territory capital. At first, William Henry Harrison, a territorial secretary, and 3 judges were the only government the Indiana Territory had. But in 1804, settlers wanted to have their voices heard in the government that made the decisions they lived by. So the territory moved to the next stage of becoming a state. Now people who owned a certain amount of land and paid taxes could vote, and a General Assembly formed. A General Assembly is a body of people elected by voters to represent their opinions in government. The people elected to the General Assembly were called delegates. When William Henry Harrison was governor of the Indiana Territory, Native Americans lived on most of the land the U.S. wanted to own. To claim the land, Harrison got Native Americans to sign 10 treaties between 1803 and 1809. The treaties said that millions of acres of land in the territory now belonged to the United States. This upset several of the Native American tribes, and they battled to defend their land. Some of the Native American tribes moved west, but some still live in Indiana today. William Henry Harrison retired from being governor of the territory in 1812 and moved to Ohio. A man named Thomas Posey became the new governor. By 1813, the land that is now Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota had broken off from the Indiana Territory. It didn't make sense for Vincennes, Indiana, to be the capital anymore because it was in the very western part of the territory. The government decided to move the capital to a location more in the middle of the territory. Corydon was central to where most settlers lived along the Ohio River, so it was chosen as the Indiana Territory capital in 1813. A large group of settlers thought we should become a state because we would be stronger if we were a part of the United States. But there was another group of settlers that did not want to become a state because Indiana would enter the Union as a free state, a state where slavery was against the law. We know now that slavery is wrong, and it was a system that hurt millions of African Americans in the United States. But at the time, the debate over whether slavery should exist was the biggest issue in the territory. The debate ended when Indiana entered the Union as a free state on December 11, 1816.